So it's been a month since our last recording, and we were talking about the direction that you're growing and what's keeping you busy. And a lot of the work that you do, Roxanne, is business transition consulting and all the different moving pieces there. And we've also talked ages ago about your C3 process. So can you maybe just give us a high-level overview of how those kind of integrate?
Yeah, actually. So the C3 process is really about clarity, which is our case history. So learning, exactly what's going on. So when we talk about business transitions, who are the players and how is that going to integrate? So it's one thing to say you're selling the business and I'm dealing with you solely as a seller. Clarity involves what does your next chapter look like? It involves what does your family dynamics look like? What are all the factors that could potentially impact what that money needs to do for you moving forward? When I'm dealing with, I'm going to say partnership creation, not necessarily in the legal version of partnership, that clarity really has to do with looking at each other's expectations on what that new consolidation is going to look like. And really covering off what I call the 3Ds. So what happens in the event of death, disability, and disgruntlement? We need to make sure we can describe what that is when everybody's head is clear and when we're still in what I call the honeymoon phase, when we all still love each other. Because if we wait until the bad things happen, it's just not a good time to be making decisions. So it's so much better to do it ahead of time. The second C is confidence, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we've looked at all those factors, and now I can present with you the information on what happens if this happens and what happens if that happens, and are we all on the same page so that you know how to make those choices and decisions moving forward, so that in the final C, control, we truly do take you to a place of peace, power, and success.
It's almost like you're reading that. It just rolled off your tongue so easily.
It's not reading it.
But you truly embrace that, and it's what you do every day. So I guess that makes sense. But you had talked about in your second C how the disgruntlement, and can you take me into a worst case scenario with that, things that we've seen happen?
Not a client of mine, but truly the worst that I've ever read about happening was two ophthalmologist partners in a laser refractive surgery clinic. The one partner actually hired a hitman to kill off his other partner. So if you don't think disgruntlement can go bad, it can go very, very bad. And in this case, the hitman actually turned him in. So undercover hitman, I'm not really sure. This is many, many years ago when I was still practicing, but just a bizarre story.
I was not anticipating that.
Yeah. In most cases, disgruntlement is, we're just not happy. It's not a happy marriage anymore, right? So how do we balance making the financial decision with the fact that what's important to us mentally and emotionally? And right now, at a time when we're watching the Olympics, Simone Biles' exit is a prime example of how it's so important that we put our mental health first. And we're starting to see that becoming something people are talking about very openly. And I think it's vital. It might not always make the most sense for you, but at the end of the day, what's ultimately most important to you?
Yeah, you had also touched on it's kind of like a marriage, and it absolutely is. And the leading cause of divorce is financial mismanagement. So if you're not on the same page with your household partner and your business partner, and sometimes we even see that the household and business partner are one and the same, that is just truly setting yourself up for not success if you haven't looked at all the moving pieces, right?
Yeah, ideally we want to bring all the parties to the table, right? If it's going to impact you and your household, ultimately it's impacting your life. So again, when I tie it back to being the family CFO, ideally I work with small business owners. So it's a combination of your business with your family, because at the end of the day, it really is about your family. Yeah. If your primary focus is 100% on the dollars and cents, you're probably not a great fit for me, because I truly believe at the end of the day, it's what we do with the family, what legacy we're leaving, how we're creating happiness and wholeness. That's a priority, which is perhaps a different way of thinking about financial planning.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So just in terms of the engagement process with you, if someone were to work with you, can you just describe a little bit about what that process looks like and what they would receive?
So essentially we start, with just a general conversation. We need to know that what your concerns are something I can help you with, but also we need to make sure we mesh, because if you are truly that dollars and cents person and I'm trying to bring in that soft side, we're not likely going to work well together. So that first meeting is just kind of to feel each other out and get an understanding. From there, we do that deeper dive into clarity. It's really about figuring out what all the priorities are, what all the moving pieces are, collecting all the data. On the confidence side, we start analyzing things and possibly bringing in other specialists to help us along the way, right? Do we need a cash flow specialist in here? Do we need a lawyer because perhaps I'm seeing some gaps in your current lawyer system that needs some extra filling for this transaction, right? Do we need to bring in some specialty accountants to work with your current accountant? Because again, we're dealing with perhaps a segment that your current accountant doesn't have great familiarity with, right? So confidence is really about kind of gathering all those pieces and bringing them together. And then also working with the investment and the insurance side and how does all this mix? So we start looking at all those moving pieces and integrating them.
And you had mentioned there again about the lawyers and the accountants, and it's just like you. It's not necessarily something that you engage with on an everyday basis, that I need a business transition specialist or I need a business transition lawyer. It's very niche, right? It's not something that everybody does every day, and it has a unique set of challenges. So it's great that you've built out your network to be able to help facilitate those in an appropriate manner. I know even myself, I came from a small town, so I've found sometimes that you get a bit of a niche accounting and niche lawyers that kind of know the basics of their familiarity within their unique bubble. But again, those complex structures, or if you've grown your business beyond your small town, then what's next? So that's really great that you're kind of quarterbacking all those moving pieces for sure.
Yeah, I often say we don't know what we don't know, and that holds true for professionals in every group, right? If we've got a great professional in your corner, they know who to reach out to for help. But sometimes when they've lived in that silo so long, they don't necessarily know who some of those players are. So we can bring some of those in for them too.
And while we're on the subject, you also mentioned about the investments and the insurance piece. And so I know that financial planners or insurance advisors, there's a bit of a stigma that it's product. And so I think it's just really important that people understand again that your process is built on really looking at all the pieces and making sure that they make sense, that you're comfortable. And if that's all they need, then great. But you also have the ability to make the recommendations or find the trusted professionals that can help facilitate those other pieces. So I think that's really unique.
Yeah, I think it's always important that we put product after planning. Because at the end of the day, if I'm looking at, say, a partnership agreement and we're going to have disability clauses in there, how are you going to fund those? Right? Perhaps you have independent funding. Perhaps you have, a great grandmother who left you a nice sizable piece. Then that's the funding. It doesn't need to be a product. But we also want to look at how does the product make sense financially compared to self-funding financially. Look at those two pieces.
Yeah.
Well,
when you have
so that you can make the decision.
When you have business partners too, it may be that one can financially afford it out of pocket, but did the other inherit all this money from great grandma? It's a case by case unique circumstance every time. So it's important that both players are coming to the table equally.
Yeah. So lots of moving parts, but again, product should only ever come after we've had a thorough review of all those moving parts, right? We need to look at, what does this money need to do for you from a lifestyle and legacy perspective? Okay, what rate of return? What makes sense, right? The product is always after, not first.
Yeah. And also we want to avoid the lotto effect too, right? Is that you've sold your business, that you have put your blood, sweat, tears, and everything you've given, and then you sell it, you have a lump sum in your pocket, and all of a sudden you feel like you've won the lotto and you spend. So is that buyout ever going to be enough if the adequate planning's not done?
Yeah, and I've used that lotto effect, to describe that to some of my clients, because at the end of the day, the vast majority of big money lotto winners don't have anything a year later.
Yeah.
Right? They may have a house, but now they can't even afford to manage that house.
Yeah.
It's sad because they didn't get the help they needed to make sure that money was going to last and do what they needed it to do.
Yeah. Yeah, so important. And fundamentally, those that have challenges with cash flow, money management, it doesn't matter if you make $50,000 or $100,000 or $2 million a year. If you have challenges in that regard, they just grow with you.
They do grow with you. Lifestyle grows with you.
Yeah.
Right.
So really great conversation, Roxanne. I appreciate you taking the time. And of course, if anybody has any questions, we would be happy to share. Our contact information is coming right up. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.